It's finally hitting home. The price of free renewable energy is smashing our household and our business budgets. The power bills are starting to arrive, and there has been a massive jump in prices. Just this week, I got my home electricity account, and while the consumption remained virtually identical, the cost nearly doubled. Make no mistake, that is a direct result of government policies that have undermined our competitive economic advantage, which has always been cheap and reliable power. And it's just one of the reasons Australia is sliding backwards. We barely make anything here anymore. Manufacturing is simply unaffordable, which in turn makes us uncompetitive. And of course, I understand it's not just power prices that are doing this, but they are a significant contributor. We've also got high wages, low productivity, business has been strangled by red, green and black tape, and there's even a new bureaucratic tape that's now being identified. It's called blue tape. That's the restrictions and burdens placed on our businesses by the international outfits like the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the OECD and the World Economic Forum, a cabal of globalists who are treated as deities by our unthinking political class. Remember, these are the mobs that push for mass migration, open borders to economic refugees, universal basic income, and centralised power and authority. They want global government, make no mistake about that. And they want you to cut your carbon footprint and your meat consumption while they fly about in their private jets to climate conferences and dine on Chateaubriand. They're hypocrites of the highest order. And that hypocrisy, it's reflected in your electricity bill every single quarter. And have you noticed that as electricity prices are going up and supply becomes less reliable, these same groups and their political patsies are pushing us to even more electrification. They want us to drive electric cars and use electric trucks. They want to phase out gas use in the family home. They want electric currencies through the programmable central bank digital currencies. And all of these measures, trust me on this, they are not about saving the planet or changing the climate. They're all about more control over you. If electricity is the means by which your life and my life are powered, then government can control that power at will. Smart meters allow them to ration and restrict your right to that power. They can isolate devices or draw from your electric vehicle battery whenever they want to. And right now, I understand they need your permission to do this. But once we're all locked in, the government can pretty much do whatever it wants. And we now know that most people will accept it with barely a whimper. I mean, COVID taught the overlords how compliant and suggestible the general public actually is. They know that if they create a coordinated fear campaign built around censorship and suppression of the truth, most people will fall into line. Those that don't, well, they're marginalised, they're isolated, they can be cancelled or even imprisoned. I mean, that used to be the stuff of tin pot dictatorship, but we've now seen it happen in the West. And other Western nations have progressed down this dangerous path much further than Australia. But I have to say we are fast running in the same direction. But it's not too late to stop it, but it will take a robust, a conscientious and a committed political party to put the interests of Australian citizens and our nation ahead of the desires of these globalist goals. Unfortunately, our current PM, Anthony Albanese, and Labor, they're not up to the task. Albo has now been labelled a weak beta male by voters. Now that is a damning but accurate label that I think is actually going to stick with the Prime Minister, a weak beta male. I mean, Albanese's most extended commitment to anything has been his hard left faction loyalty of the Labor Party, where he loved fighting Tories. It's the spirit to bring us all together, isn't it? And have you noticed that, like many committed socialists, he quickly transitioned to enjoy the trappings of political entitlement and now seems to have a particular penchant for the prime ministerial jet. Outside of frequent flyer miles, Albo has unleashed an unprecedented wave of migration, which of course is adding pressure to all the areas of our lives that many of us are already struggling with: inflation, housing, service provision, congestion. And if you can believe it, they've issued 860 visas for Palestinians to come to Australia. Now, I'm not alone in asking why we'd even contemplate this when these people's neighbours won't even allow them in. I mean, do the neighbours know something we don't, or are we just presuming we're more intelligent than them? I'd hazard it's not the latter, because our visa system is a mess. Let's remember, under Labor, we now have non-citizen criminals, pedophiles, sex offenders, and killers living in our community rather than in detention or deported. And of course, we're told these new Palestinian arrivals will have complete security checks. I'm not alone in believing that. There is nothing I have seen that demonstrates confidence in our ability to effectively vet the innermost feelings of people coming from a society that actually elected Hamas into government. Do you remember the cheering masses in Gaza after their terror attacks on Israel? I've shown you in previous shows the propaganda push through Palestinian media about hating the Jews and wanting to wipe them off the face of the earth. And so do you really think our Canberra-based bureaucrats, whom I should remind you are the same ones that voted 75% for the voice, do you think they give a hoot about appropriate immigration security checks? Frankly, I don't. My sense is most of them, like most of Labor, sign up to all the dictates of the bodies that I mentioned before. When you do peer under the hood of groups like the United Nations, you actually see deep-seated anti-Jewish and anti-Israeli sentiment. I've seen that with my own eyes. I've sat in on UN meetings in New York, chaired by some minor European royal, where the most outrageous anti-Israel propaganda was spoken. Frankly, we don't need more of that in this country. We need a lot less of it. And that means we need less of the United Nations. We need less of the World Health Organization. We need less of the OECD, less of the IMF, less of the WEF. We need less acronyms, full stop. We need to ditch the slavish obedience to their climate change, their immigration, their globalization and citizen control agenda. Of course, that's going to take politicians of courage and determination. There are some signs of optimism there. Peter Dutton has demonstrated he probably has got the ticker to do that. I mean, he stared down some of the wets in his party over the voice, although letting the likes of Simon Birmingham stand as leader while in the Senate while actively opposing party policy remains a weak spot. But there are plenty of other weak spots in the coalition lineup, and I fear too few have the commitment or the intellectual rigour necessary for what lies ahead. And that's why I found it really interesting today to read the former Treasurer and now Goldman Sachs Chairman Josh Frydenberg is actually considering re-entering the political fray. Now, I do not know anyone that says Frydenberg isn't intelligent. He's actually very, very sharp, and he would bring powerful policy strength to the coalition. He's also well liked. He's well connected, and that should also be a plus for the coalition. However, there will be a legacy of the wasted and damaging years of COVID policy that has to be overcome if he and the Liberal Party wants to get back in the game. The country doesn't need more of the same. We actually need political courage to stand as part of a global community, but fiercely independent of their bureaucratic demands. Think about it. We have the natural resources, we have the space, we have the people. In fact, we have everything we need to make Australia the safest, most productive and most prosperous nation on earth. But we're lacking just one thing. We don't have the political leadership to fulfil that potential.